update on all things food, family, community, gardening, whatever. We call it SideCar. If it has to do with rituals around food and holidays, making food or taking it places, or remembering what we were eating during important times in our lives, we'll talk about it here. I am your host and bestie, Jen Coleslaw, coming to you from the soulless suburbs of Northern Virginia. So how was your week? A mixed bag? There's a lot going on in the world, friends, and it's okay if it's a little much. Even I sometimes just want to stay in bed and watch Doctor Who all day. Last week's short podcast on the death of Queen Elizabeth and how we might frame all the rituals around her funeral to help our own selves with all the things we lost in the last 3 years really resonated with a lot of folks. And I got a lot of nice messages from people who said that it struck them in unexpected ways. And while I'm not glad that you may have had some sadness, that something I wrote and said affected you in a way that you were not anticipating or that it really spoke to you, well, that's some high praise. So thank you very much for reaching out and letting me know. I've watched a lot of the coverage of the business of a royal funeral happening in the UK, which included plenty of sad Brits waiting in lines. And I have opened up Monday for the funeral. But I've also absorbed a lot of thoughtful discussion online and on TV about how conflicted some folks are who did not love all of the colonization of other countries, maybe their own, but still felt some connection to the Queen and had feelings about her death. It is absolutely the time to be talking about independence for all the countries that wanted it, and that is up to them to decide. But no matter where you fall on the spectrum of pro-monarchy or anti-monarchy, you cannot take away from the outpouring of condolence by miles-long lines of people just waiting to say goodbye or whatever. I won't presume to know what is in people's hearts or in their heads when they walk up to the Queen lying in Westminster Hall. But I will ask, rhetorically of course, how many conservative right-wing politicians and pundits and talk show hosts and podcast people would have this kind of send-off? Do you think that people would line up for over 30 hours in the rain and chilly London-type weather for 10 seconds of silent prayer or goodbye? Do you think that there's even anyone on the non-conservative side that would command that kind of respect in the U.S.? Because I'm not sure that there is. I've been thinking a lot about how major news events of the last 60 years would be covered now. The JFK and Martin Luther King assassinations. How do you think Fox News or Newsmax would cover those today? That their libtard politics got them killed? That this should be a warning to anyone else thinking about running their mouths for immigrants or people of color or the poor? Watergate? Those were his documents, and as the president, he absolutely had the right to know what people were saying about him. At that time, we had maybe 3 news outlets, if you were lucky if you had one, plus the newspapers and radio stations that reported the news. They editorialized on editorial pages only, and not all at all on nightly news. To be honest, we did not have very good TV reception when I was growing up, so we had one channel. It was a CBS affiliate, plus the newspaper in the late 70s and 80s, and that's where we got our news from. And I don't remember it having a political bent. Anyway, we got all the same truthful information for the most part, no matter what news outlet you watched or read. Can the same be said now? I know it's so easy to play both sides from the middle and say, well, all the networks lie now. It's how they get clicks and make money. But the truth is that not all the news outlets deal in half-truths and misinformation. Just because you don't like what PBS NewsHour is saying, because it's critical of what appears to be the actual human trafficking of asylum seekers in Texas, Arizona, and Florida, doesn't mean they aren't reporting out the truth. I don't want my podcast to be overly political all the time, but I need to keep sounding the alarm. There's absolutely no reason for us to accept lies as truth in the name of quote-unquote opinion. Opinions are whether you think orange cats are the best cats, or whether the white pineapple-flavored jelly beans are the #1 flavor in a bag of Brock's Jellybird eggs, or if 12 pillows on the bed is too many. Not whether people should be afforded basic human rights. There are election deniers on the ballot in 27 states next month. And many of those races are for Secretary of State, which has the ability to not certify an election if they don't like the results. I know this sounds bonkers, but listen to the people sounding these alarms. This is happening in real time. One of my favorite things to say to people who are unreasonable is, you are entitled to your own opinions, but not your own facts. You absolutely have the right to be wrong. It is truly a hallmark of toxic privilege when you wave your hand and say everyone is bad, they all do it, blah, 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 because no, they absolutely do not. No governor of a blue state plucks asylum seekers and migrants who have traveled 1,000 miles to get a better life for their families, lies to them, gives them fake documents, uses COVID relief money to fly or bus them up to the vice president's house in Washington, D.C., or Martha's Vineyard, or the Port Authority of New York, or Sacramento, California. And those places, they stepped up. The cities and the towns stepped up. Regular people stepped up, found them housing and food and baby cribs and translators and medical care. The Fox News cameras who were waiting for those gotcha moments when no one else knew this was happening, they didn't step up. Do you remember when Texas's grid failed during a terrible snow and ice storm a few years ago, and Ted Cruz was caught in Cancun rather than in his own state helping? Who scrambled the jets in New York to raise money and send supplies, and literally went down there to help? Blue state congresspeople like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the leftist commie pinko scourge of the right wing, did not even hesitate. So while I know I'm preaching to the choir here on the topic of these both sides do it bullshit, what I'm asking of you, what I'm imploring, is that you start standing up to this, calling it out. I shut down some anti-union nonsense the other day in my own little universe. People who had the very bad idea to talk smack about the rail union negotiations without knowing what the rail workers were asking for. And I speak up now every time I see a friend or family member post a stupid meme that just perpetuates a lie about border security and asylum seekers and no one wants to work anymore. We liberals have to take a page out of the right-wing comic book and really start pushing back and require our elected officials to do the same. Because we are never going to be a country, for better or worse, and that is up to you to decide, who has a 10-mile-long line of people who wait 30 hours to say goodbye to a leader of that country. But at least we can try not to burn this one down to the ground, grinding the bones of our ancestors to ash and salting the earth with gasoline so we can keep burning it down. So please, grab a goddamn hose, people. In more positive news, for those of you who have been following along, I've been helping one of my best friends here in Virginia open his own vet hospital, and today we spent some time literally cleaning up the 1 billion boxes, making labels, and wiping down countertops because he's opening to clients tomorrow and he wanted to give his staff the day off. So a bunch of us clients and friends and freelancers went up and worked over 5 hours putting away gauze and chlorhexidine and stacking stuff. This is a man who, when he was off one night and we had an emergency and the wait at the ER was going to be 7 hours, made us come out to his house with Waffles so he could just make sure he was okay. And just so you know, Waffles had just pulled a muscle jumping off the bed, and he was very much a drama llama about it, and we were very worried because he never says anything. He was fine. And who at the very beginning of the pandemic, when we had a terribly sick kitten, and the clinic where he was working wasn't allowing human people inside, he met me outside the clinic on the sidewalk with the necessary materials so we could release little Petite from his suffering, while I held him wrapped in my jacket against the winter cold and told him I loved him. These are just 2 of our stories, and I know that others have more. He's exactly the person you would choose to be part of your family when you get to choose your family, and we have imprinted upon him like baby ducks, and we could not be more pleased to be part of his family and part of this new venture. I brought a hot water kettle and some tea bags, and I'll leave a favorite mug soon, and today I made a label for my locker up in the employee break room, and I felt like I belonged somewhere again. It's a good feeling. We're tired, but it's a good feeling. Okay, so how about some food holidays for this week? I know this is late to you this week, but hopefully you celebrated today's holiday, which was National Cheeseburger Day. A Fat Burger opened in our neighborhood, but we haven't been yet. This week, we hope. Tomorrow, Monday, September 19th, is National Butterscotch Pudding Day, and while this seems like an old person dessert, and I guess I am an old person, there was a place in Providence, Trinity Brew House, that still exists and made the very best homemade butterscotch pudding. And the days before Postmates and Uber Eats, I would often get some to go when I was there for a beer after work. It was so rich and creamy with real whipped cream on top. But I just checked and it doesn't look like it's on the menu anymore, which is such a bummer. I should have tried to get the recipe. It is also Adopt a Less Adoptable Pet Day, which I think means maybe an elderly dog or a three-legged cat. I mean, I suppose they could mean like a jellyfish or a small nest of yellow jackets because they are less adoptable for sure. But as someone who has a beagle that is most assuredly on the doggy spectrum, and a blind and wobbly diabetic Weimaraner, and an orange cat that likes to poop in the bathtub, which sounds horrible, but honestly, it's a very easy place to clean up poop. I would say err on the side of caution with one of those animals and get one of them and not, say, a Canada goose. Tuesday is Rum Punch Day, which I guess people still drink. I don't know because I don't drink rum. Luckily, it is also Pepperoni Pizza Day, which I do like a lot, and maybe we'll celebrate by getting one. Waffles says Tuesday is also International NFT Day, and if you don't know what an NFT is, they are non-findable treats, which are treats that Ben gives to Ladybug that she loses because she's blind and her nose doesn't work, that Waffles then locates and eats for her, but then tells her they are non-findable treats, or NFTs. Thank you, Waffles. Wednesday is International Banana Festival, which frankly should be a whole week, between Bananas Foster, Bananas Bread, banana pudding, banana Laffy Taffy, so many banana things. How can we be satisfied with just one day? It's also National Pecan Cookie Day, and one of my favorite pecan cookies is a date pecan snowball that my mother always made at Christmas and now I make. And it's like a little Russian tea cake but with pecans and dates, and so it is a little crunchy and a little chewy, and then the whole thing is rolled in powdered sugar. I will throw the recipe up in the Patreon recipe folder, which is one of the benefits of being a Patreon. Thursday is National Ice Cream Cone Day, and here's a question I should have asked at the beginning of this whole podcast thing. Sugar cone, waffle cone, or wafer cone? I actually like sugar cones myself. Thursday is also National Black Women's Equal Pay Day, which is the approximate day a black woman must work into the new year to make what a white, non-Hispanic man made at the end of the previous year. So that means that a black woman has to work all of these days into this year in order to make what a man makes. That just blows my mind. Black women make 58 cents on the dollar to what white men make. Now, the same day for Indigenous women is November 30th, and that same day for Latina women is December 8th. December 8th, people! That's almost the end of the year. Latina women have to work almost an entire year. This is why labor unions are so important, people. Anyway, Friday is White Chocolate Day, and as you know, I have a special relationship with white chocolate, especially some found on the ground. Shout out to my girlfriend Jen Goldbeck, who will also eat chocolate off the ground with me, and it is also Hug a Vegetarian Day, and she's a vegetarian, and so if she was here, I would probably give her a hug. Friday is also the first day of autumn, and I will be so glad to see summer in the rearview mirror because I hate the heat so much. I am so sick of air conditioning. Saturday is Cherry's Jubilee Day, and I am just not a person who thinks that lighting dessert on fire is a good idea. So instead, I will invite you to either indulge in some chocolate-covered cherries or perhaps some boozy cherries in a cocktail. It's also National Public Lands Day, which is a great day to remember to bring your own water bottle with you to a park, because if I see you in a public space like a park or a walking trail or a bike path with a single-use water bottle, I will glare at you with a death stare that you will absolutely feel for hours afterwards. And finally, Sunday is Rosh Hashanah, which is the start of the Jewish New Year, and I'm wishing all of my friends a happy and healthy New Year. It's also National Food Service Employees Day, and I know that I probably do not have to remind you that food service employees are for appreciating and tipping generously and not for eating. And speaking of things not for eating, I can't believe that my calendar also tells me it's National Roadkill Day, and I quote, "A sustainable way to feed America and clean the streets. No fucking thank you. I will eat chocolate chips off the neighbor's lawn, but not a 3-day-old raccoon left in the road." Okay, so that's it for food holidays in this week's podcast. Please keep rating and sharing the podcast, talking it up in your book club and dog parks and waiting rooms at your dentist's office and other spaces where you find community. You can support this work by joining the Patreon. They get extra missives from me every other week or so, either digitally or in the snail mail. I hope you have a good week coming up, and that you take the time to remember someone or someone you've lost over the past couple of years, and that if you live in a community that is either divesting itself of migrants and asylum seekers or are finding them on your doorstep because of the capricious actions of evil men, you think long and hard about your response to those actions and the needs of those people who crossed 1,000 miles to get here. I'll see you next week, and remember, unions brought you the 5-day work week, the 8-hour workday, sick leave, child labor laws, health and safety rules on the job, and more, and unions built the middle class, not corporations or billionaires or politicians bought by corporations and billionaires.